Is it worth it to take a pay cut to pivot into a new industry or a slightly different job? I'm Daniel, and I recently took a $15,000 pay cut from my previous full-time job to my current full-time job to pivot into bioinformatics and molecular biology research full-time at the world's largest biomedical research institution. I was thinking about this question when I was considering this slight pivot because I have related experience to what I'm doing now, but my previous job was in medical device, regulatory affairs, and business operations. Now it's research heavy, and I was curious about whether the pivot was a good choice. And yes, for me, absolutely it was. And for me, the answer to that question is yes. I think the pivot is worth it, even at the expense of a pay cut. But for some people, they might be a little bit more hesitant to do that, and I totally relate to that. So I'm going to talk about some things that went into my decision that can hopefully help you if you're thinking about making a similar pivot. So the first thing is to have a really good reason to make such a pivot, because my previous company, they liked me a lot. I had gotten promoted after only 4 months of being there, and I didn't love the job necessarily, but I was really good at it, and I knew that I could grow there long term. Long term, however, I have aspirations to do research, and my long term career goal is to be a physician scientist. So I knew that to get into an MD, PhD program to prepare me for that career, I needed more research experience, and I really wanted to do some computational work as well in biomedicine. I ended up finding the perfect position for me. It's really a dream job at my stage of life right now. So I love my job. And I really did not hesitate that much for the pay cut. I thought about it because, a $15,000 pay cut is significant, right? That's basically an extra $1,000 after taxes per month to do whatever you want with, right? So losing that was like, should I do it? But overall, it was really worth it. But it was worth it because it really is a stepping stone for me to continue pivoting in the direction that I want to go towards. So I think if someone doesn't have a clear direction for their long-term career aspirations, then taking a pay cut to pivot might not be worth it. For example, let's say someone's working in sales and they are really good at it, they have an established career, and then they want to dabble in finance and they're thinking about getting their certified professional or certified financial planner, I forget what the certificate is, and then pivoting in that direction. But they're not 100% dead set on it, they're considering dabbling in it. I think that's probably not worth taking a pay cut to try out unless they have had an interest in finance for a while, because if you're just going to dabble in it, it's probably better just to stick with your current full-time job, and you can always dabble it part-time on your own time in the evenings and weekends, right? Like you can literally build up in that example, your financial planning expertise in the evenings and weekends, and then do that on the side while you continue sustaining your career that you're already good at, that maybe you enjoy in sales. That's just an illustration just to show that if you're considering pivoting to dabble in something, I think that's probably not worth it, because you can always dabble in something part-time. You don't need to take a big pay cut to do that. Another thing to think about is your current financial situation. For sure, if you really can't afford to make less money because of your financial obligations, that's definitely worth hesitating about. However, I will say, if you're hesitant because of the finances, but you're dead set on pursuing that pivot for your long-term career, I think it's actually worth it to take the pay cut to pursue that pivot, even if you're in financial constraints. Because if you wait until all your finances are in order, you might be waiting a long time. And honestly, what happens to a lot of people is they wait until this thing gets resolved, and then they're like, oh, I gotta wait until this thing gets resolved, and then they never end up pivoting, right? They never end up doing what they actually want to do. And you don't want to be like that. You don't want to be 80 and be like, oh, like I'm still waiting for the perfect time, and then you just, you don't get to do it before your life runs out. Like I think just for sure, even if you're in financial constraints, go for the pivot. If you're dead set on it, even if you're in financial constraints. But that is something to think about, of course. Another thing you want to keep in mind is that as you're pivoting, as you're taking interviews for the positions that you're interested in pivoting into, people are going to be asking you like, okay, like, why are you interested in doing this? For example, I know people who have worked in different random jobs and then they're going to be applying to medical school. And when I've asked them their aspirations to go into medical school, some people don't have very compelling stories. Like, where if I was an admissions committee, I wouldn't see their experience as a track record of commitment to the medical profession. It just seems like a random interest. But for others in this group, there are people who I'm like, yes, that tracks exactly with what your interests are. I see your passion for medicine. That makes sense to me. So you really want to be able to frame your story and be able to make that a compelling case. And also for yourself, like, does your story make sense to you as you're considering this pivot? For sure. And I think another thing I'll say is that as you're considering the pay cut, you want to think about if you'll eventually make enough money for you to be happy with. So for example, in my case, I did take that pay cut, but long term, I'll continue to make more money and I'll be really set for sure as a physician scientist. So I'm not worried about the money. But if I was pivoting into something that wasn't going to pay that well long term, that might give me pause, because let's say I was making $80,000 as a salesperson and then I pivot into something that pays a lot less, like pays $50,000 or something. So if I don't see a career ramp to get back up to 80,000, that might make me hesitate, unless someone's watching this and they're like, you know what? Yeah, honestly, Daniel, I don't mind. Like, I just want to do this and I'll be way happier even making less money long term. That's super valid, and I honestly think that's cool. So for example, I know someone who was working a very busy event planning job and then they switched into baking. They love baking. They make less money, but they're way happier, and that is super valid, of course. So you got to do something that you're going to be happy with for your life. So taking a pay cut to pivot into something that makes you happier long term, even if it's something that's never going to make as much money, is perfectly valid, of course. These are some thought processes. Let me know if you have any questions. Hope this is helpful. Thanks for watching.